In this chapter, what we're going to do is we're going to look at thermodynamics. And the title for chapter 18 is Entropy, Free Energy, and Equilibrium, but we generally refer to this as thermodynamics. This is an extension of the topics that were covered in the first semester, where you looked at calorimetry and heats of reaction and enthalpy in general. So we're going to talk about enthalpy as well, but we're going to focus mainly on entropy. And then once we've talked about entropy, we'll combine that with enthalpy to give us something called the Gibbs free energy change. And then finally, we'll connect that to chemical equilibrium. So we're switching it up a little bit, not as much equilibrium in this chapter, although we will reconnect it at the end. So in general, the way chemistry textbooks approach this topic is an extensive discussion of entropy, which is a measure of the disorder of a system or of the surroundings or even both. And entropy is a measure of disorder. So we're going to talk about that first. Then we go into some details about calculating entropy and what it means, the meaning of entropy. And then we move on into this idea of spontaneity. So it's kind of an interesting chapter. So if you look at this first picture here of an explosion, this is a type of process that creates an enormous amount of disorder and a large amount of entropy, we would say that. So you're going to look at a lot of details about that. And it's very useful because in the discussion, we look at this idea of spontaneity, right? So spontaneity is the idea that certain processes tend to happen. We tend to observe them in nature. Other processes, we don't tend to observe them. In fact, we very often can tell whether something is spontaneous or not just by watching a film or a video of it. So, for example, if we were to look at this picture down here of a log burning, we realize over time it's going to turn to ash. But imagine it went backwards. Imagine that the ash suddenly started turning back into a log. We would recognize that there's something wrong with that. There's something not natural about that process. So our brains have a hardwired sense of what is spontaneous and what is not. So it's an interesting chapter. So I hope you enjoy it. And this is where the course kind of takes a little bit of a shift. We're going to move a little bit away from doing these calculations of concentrations and such. And we're going to look at some specialized topics, thermodynamics in this case. Next, we'll look at electrochemistry, and then we'll move on to nuclear chemistry and organic chemistry. So it's kind of becomes a little bit more topical for the rest of the course.